There is a moment in March of 1942 when a man stands barefoot on volcanic rock under equatorial sun, watching another man die by degrees, and he knows with absolute certainty that if he moves, if he speaks, if he draws the attention of the guards now, he will be joining that man in the dirt within seconds. He also knows, with the same cold clarity, that silence is a choice he cannot live with. Between these two certainties lies a decision that will ripple forward through time in ways impossible to predict. A decision made in the space of 3 heartbeats that will eventually determine whether 2,700 men live or die under falling bombs 18 months hence. But he does not know that yet. All he knows is the sound of wood striking bone, the wet rasp of labored breathing, and the weight of every eye in the compound turning toward him as he takes his first step forward. His name is Richard not Antrim. He is 33 years old. He is a lieutenant commander in the United States Navy, though that rank means precisely nothing now. For days ago, his ship was blown apart beneath him. 3 days ago, he floated in the Java Sea with oil in his lungs and shrapnel in his shoulder, watching the horizon for rescue that never came. 2 days ago, Japanese patrol boats pulled him from the water along with dozens of other survivors, and he became, in an instant that felt like falling through ice, a prisoner of war. Yesterday, they force-marched the survivors inland through jungle heat to a place the Dutch called Makassar, a colonial port city on the southwestern peninsula of Celebes Island. The Japanese have converted an old Dutch barracks here into a detention facility. There are already more than 2,000 Allied prisoners inside when Antrim arrives, skeletal, fevered, held together by will alone. The compound is surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Beyond the wire, the jungle presses close, indifferent and total. There is no rescue coming. There is no higher authority to appeal to. There is only the camp, the wire, the guards, and the slow erosion of everything that used to separate men from animals. The war that brought him here began, for Antrim, in another life. He graduated from the Naval Academy at Annapolis in 1931, a Depression-era officer in a peacetime navy that seemed destined for obsolescence. He was bright, disciplined, competent but not flashy, the kind of man who earned respect through consistency rather than charisma. He served on destroyers and cruisers, learned navigation and gunnery, studied the theories of naval warfare that seemed increasingly abstract as the decade wore on. Then came Pearl Harbor and the theories became blood and steel. By early 1942, Antrim was executive officer aboard the USS Pope, a 4-stack destroyer assigned to the Asiatic Fleet, tasked with the impossible mission of slowing the Japanese advance through the Dutch East Indies. It was a doomed campaign from the start. The Allies were outnumbered, outgunned, operating with obsolete equipment and fractured command structures. They fought anyway because the alternative was unthinkable. On the 1st of March, 1942, the Pope participated in the Second Battle of the Java Sea, a desperate and chaotic engagement that saw Allied cruisers and destroyers attempting to intercept a Japanese invasion convoy. The battle was a catastrophe. Allied ships were sunk one after another, communication broke down, and what began as a coordinated defense devolved into a series of isolated death rides. The Pope survived the initial engagement but was crippled and leaking fuel. For the next 24 hours, her crew nursed her through shallow coastal waters, trying to reach safe harbor, knowing full well there was no such thing anymore. Japanese aircraft found them on March 2nd. The attack was methodical and overwhelming. Bombs struck the Pope amidships, tearing through deck plating, igniting fuel lines, killing men in the engine rooms who never saw the sky. The captain gave the order to abandon ship. Antrim, wounded and concussed, helped get the surviving crew into the water before the Pope rolled over and sank beneath the surface of the Java Sea, taking part of his identity with her. What followed was a kind of suspended animation, a liminal horror. Antrim and the other survivors drifted for 3 days in open water, clinging to debris, rationing hope. Some men died of their wounds. Others simply let go and slipped under. The tropical sun cooked them during the day. At night, the cold seeped into their bones. Sharks circled but did not strike, as if even they understood the futility of it. When the Japanese patrol boats finally appeared, there was no relief, only resignation. Capture was preferable to drowning, but only marginally. The The survivors were hauled aboard, stripped, searched, and bound. Those who could not climb the rope ladders were left behind. Antrim, half-conscious, was pulled onto the deck by rough hands. He remembers the smell of diesel and fish, the rapid, incomprehensible Japanese voices, the way one guard casually kicked a wounded sailor in the ribs to make him move faster. He remembers thinking, with strange detachment, that this was the beginning of something from which there might be no return. Makassar camp is a laboratory of human degradation. The Japanese guards operate under a philosophy that views surrender as the ultimate dishonor, something lower than death, and therefore prisoners as something less than human. They are not bound by the Geneva Conventions, which Japan never ratified, and even if they were, there is no one here to enforce such niceties. The prisoners are fed twice a day, watery rice mixed with vegetables too rotten for the guards to eat. Dysentery is universal. Malaria is endemic. Men die from infected cuts, from malnutrition, from dehydration, from despair. The latrines are open pits that overflow in the rain. There is no medicine. There is no privacy. The barracks are overcrowded wooden structures where men sleep on bare boards, packed so tightly that when one man turns in the night, 20 men must turn with him. But the physical suffering, brutal as it is not the worst part. The worst part is the systematic destruction of identity, the relentless daily humiliation designed to break the prisoners psychologically. Guards administer beatings for infractions both real and imagined. A man who bows too slowly receives a rifle butt to the kidneys. A man who makes eye contact is slapped until his teeth rattle. A man who stumbles under the weight of forced labor is kicked until he cannot stand, then kicked again for not standing. The violence is often arbitrary, theatrical, meant not just to punish but to demonstrate the absolute power of the captors over the captive. And the prisoners, starving and sick and exhausted beyond reason, learn to fold themselves smaller, to become invisible, to survive by erasing everything that once made them officers and sailors and men. Antrim arrives at the camp in late March with the POW survivors and is immediately absorbed into this grim ecosystem. His shoulder wound has festered, turning the surrounding tissue red and hot. He has lost 20 pounds in a week. His uniform is gone, replaced by a stained pair of shorts and nothing else. But he is still, by some stubborn internal compass, Lieutenant Commander Richard Antrim. He watches. He listens. He begins to understand the rules, written and unwritten, that govern this place. He learns which guards are sadistic and which are merely indifferent. He learns the hierarchy among the prisoners, the quiet network of senior officers who try to maintain some semblance of order and morale despite having no real authority. He learns that the worst thing a man can do here is draw attention to himself, because attention means violence, and violence means death or something close enough to make no difference. And then, one morning in April, a man draws attention. The man is a British naval officer, a lieutenant from one of the sunken cruisers. His name is lost to history, one of the thousands of names that vanished into the bureaucratic void of the war. He has been selected, along with a dozen other prisoners, for a work detail outside the main compound. The detail involves hauling supplies from the dock to a storage depot, backbreaking labor in equatorial heat with no water breaks and no mercy. At some point during the morning, the British officer falters. Perhaps his legs give out. Perhaps he is too sick to continue. Perhaps he does something that offends the guard supervising the detail. The specifics do not matter. What matters is that he is brought back to the main compound and made an example of. The guards drag him into the central yard, a bare expanse of packed earth visible from every barracks. A sergeant, a compact man with a face like hammered iron, orders the prisoners to form up and watch. This is standard procedure. Punishment is always public, always performed in front of an audience, because the point is not just to hurt one man but to terrorize all men. The British officer is forced to kneel. His hands are tied behind his back. And then the beating begins. The sergeant uses a wooden pick handle, the kind used for digging, heavy and unyielding. He strikes the officer across the shoulders, the back, the ribs. The sound is flat and percussive, wood on meat. The officer does not cry out at first. He grits his teeth and tries to absorb the blows, tries to maintain some shred of dignity. But dignity is a luxury no one can afford here. After the 10th blow, he begins to moan. After the 20th, he slumps forward, barely conscious. The sergeant does not stop. He is methodical, almost bored, delivering each strike with the same mechanical efficiency. The prisoners watching are silent. Some look away. Some stare with empty eyes. All of them understand that this could be them tomorrow, that there is no pattern, no justice, only the raw exercise of power over powerlessness. Antrim stands near the back of the formation. His shoulder throbs with each of his heartbeats. Sweat runs into his eyes. He has been in the camp for 2 weeks now, long enough to learn the essential rule. Do not intervene. Intervention is suicide. The guards will kill anyone who disrupts the order they have created, and they will do it slowly, making a lesson of it. Every fiber of his training, every survival instinct, tells him to look away, to blend into the crowd, to let this horror play out as it must. But something else, something older and more fundamental, will not let him do that. He does not make a conscious decision so much as discover that he has already decided. He steps forward. The movement is slow, deliberate. He does not run. He does not shout. He simply walks out of the formation and into the open space where the beating is taking place. Every prisoner sees him. Every guard sees him. The sergeant pauses mid-swing, pick handle raised, and turns to stare at this fool who has just volunteered for death. Antrim stops 3 paces away and bows. The bow is deep, formal, a gesture of respect. He learned it from watching the guards interact with their own officers, understanding that in Japanese military culture, hierarchy is sacred and deference is currency. When he straightens, he speaks in English slowly and clearly, though he knows the sergeant does not understand the words. But tone and body language are universal, and Antrim's tone is calm, measured, almost apologetic. He says something to the effect that the officer is too weak to endure more punishment, that continued beating will result in death, which would deprive the Japanese of a laborer. He says that he, Antrim, is stronger, healthier, better able to receive the punishment. He says that if punishment is necessary, he will take the remainder of it himself. The sergeant stares at him. The other guards tense, hands moving to their rifles. The prisoners hold their collective breath. This is insanity. This is suicide. No prisoner challenges the guards. No prisoner dictates terms. And yet here is this American, barefoot and half-starved, offering himself up as if he has any right to negotiate. The sergeant says something sharp in Japanese. Antrim bows again and repeats his offer, using the same calm tone, the same steady eye contact that communicates respect without submission. And then he does something extraordinary. He steps past the sergeant, kneels beside the British officer, and begins to untie the man's hands. For 5 seconds, the tableau is frozen. The sergeant could shoot him now. He could order the other guards to beat Antrim to death in front of everyone. He could do anything. The power is absolute. But Antrim has done something the sergeant was not prepared for. He has not attacked. He has not insulted. He has not shown fear. He has shown respect, acknowledged the sergeant's authority, and made a rational proposal within the framework of that authority. And then, without waiting for permission, he has acted as if the proposal has been accepted. It is a gamble that should not work. In 99 cases out of 100, it would end in immediate execution. But this is the 100th case. The sergeant lowers the pick handle. He barks an order. 2 guards move forward, grab Antrim by the arms, and haul him upright. The British officer, semi-conscious and bleeding, is dragged away to the barracks. Antrim is forced to his knees in the same spot, hands tied behind his back. The sergeant raises the pick handle again. But he does not strike with the same fury. The blows, when they come, are hard enough to hurt, hard enough to satisfy the need for punishment, but not hard enough to kill or permanently maim. It is a ritual now rather than an execution. After 10 blows, the sergeant stops. He says something to Antrim in Japanese, a single phrase that might be a warning or a command or simply an acknowledgement. Then he walks away. The guards untie Antrim and shove him back toward the barracks. He can barely stand. His back is a map of bruises. But he is alive. And so is the British officer. The prisoners do not cheer. They do not speak. They simply disperse, returning to their barracks in silence. But something has shifted. A man stood up when standing up was supposed to be impossible, and he survived. The calculus of the camp has been altered, however slightly. The guards are not omnipotent. Resistance, even symbolic resistance, is conceivable. Antrim spends the next 3 days on his bunk, unable to move without pain. Other prisoners bring him water, share their meager rations. They do not ask why he did it. Some of them understand. Some of them do not. But all of them have seen what leadership looks like in a place where rank and structure and authority have been stripped away. Leadership, it turns out, is not about giving orders. It is about standing in the gap when no one else will. The British officer recovers, slowly. Weeks later, he finds Antrim in the yard and tries to thank him. But Antrim waves him off, embarrassed or uncomfortable or simply unwilling to dwell on it. What he did was not heroism in the traditional sense. It was a calculation, a cold assessment of risk and reward, an intuition about what the sergeant might accept. It was also, undeniably, a moral imperative, a line he could not allow himself to cross. The intersection of those two things, calculation and morality, defines him in ways he may not fully understand. The weeks that follow are a slow grind of survival. The monsoon season arrives, turning the camp into a swamp. Disease spreads. Men die in the night and are carried out at dawn, their bodies wrapped in scraps of canvas and buried in shallow graves beyond the wire. The Japanese guards, preoccupied with their own supply shortages and the shifting fortunes of the war, become less attentive. Punishment details continue, but with less frequency. The prisoners adapt to the rhythm of captivity, developing small routines and rituals that give shape to the shapeless days. Antrim, his back slowly healing, is assigned to various labor details. He digs latrines, hauls firewood, repairs buildings. He does the work without complaint, observing, always observing. He notices which guards can be reasoned with and which cannot. He notices the patterns of inspections, the schedules of food deliveries, the routes taken by supply trucks. He catalogs information the way a navigator catalogs stars, not because he has a plan, but because information is the only resource he can hoard. In late July, an air raid siren sounds for the first time. The prisoners are herded into the barracks while the guards take cover in reinforced bunkers. The bombers, American B-24 Liberators, pass overhead at high altitude, their target elsewhere. But the message is clear. The Allies are coming. The war is not over. Hope, fragile and dangerous, flickers back to life. The Japanese commandant, a colonel named Sugiyama, responds to the threat of air raids with characteristic efficiency. He orders the prisoners to dig slit trenches throughout the camp, narrow V-shaped ditches deep enough for a man to crouch in and covered with wooden frames and earth. The work is exhausting. The prisoners, already malnourished and weak, labor under the sun with shovels and picks, moving tons of volcanic soil. The guards supervise from the shade, administering beatings to anyone who slows down. Antrim is placed in charge of one of the work gangs. The assignment is not an honor. The Japanese have learned that he can manage men, that he can get work done without constant supervision, and so they use him as an overseer. He is given a rough map showing where the trenches are to be dug and told to complete the work within 2 weeks. Failure will result in punishment for everyone. He studies the map in the brief privacy of the barracks. The trenches are to be distributed across the open ground of the camp, positioned to provide maximum coverage. But the map is vague, leaving the specific placement up to the work gangs. Antrim looks at the blank spaces, the areas of discretion, and an idea begins to form. It is a reckless idea. It is almost certainly futile, but it is the only idea he has. Over the next 2 weeks, he supervises the digging with meticulous care. He adjusts the placement of each trench, moving some a few meters to the left, others a few meters to the right. The changes are subtle, justified as accommodations for rocky soil or drainage issues. The guards, uninterested in the minutiae, approve his adjustments without question. The prisoners digging the trenches do not understand what he is doing, and he does not explain. He simply directs the work, trench by trench, day by day, following the pattern he has drawn in his mind. When the work is complete and the wooden frames are in place, the camp has 57 slit trenches scattered across its open ground. From the ground level, they appear random, utilitarian. But from the air, at altitude, with the trenches cutting dark lines across the pale volcanic soil, they form two distinct letters, U and S. Antrim does not tell anyone what he has done. The risk is staggering. If the Japanese discover the signal, they will execute him and probably dozens of others as an example. If Allied reconnaissance planes do not spot it, the effort is meaningless. If the planes spot it but do not relay the information, the effort is meaningless. If the information is relayed but not believed, the effort is meaningless. The chain of contingencies is so long that the probability of success approaches zero. But zero is not nothing, and nothing is all he has to offer. Months pass. The air raid sirens sound more frequently. Allied bombers fly over the island, striking Japanese airfields, supply depots, communication centers. The prisoners learn to recognize the engine sounds, the high drone of B-24s, the lower rumble of B-25s. They watch the sky and allow themselves to hope, despite knowing that hope is a luxury that can be revoked at any moment. In October of 1943, an American reconnaissance plane, a photographic variant of the B-24, makes a high-altitude pass over southern Celebes. The mission is routine, part of the ongoing effort to map Japanese installations and identify bombing targets. The photographs are developed at a base in Australia and analyzed by intelligence officers trained to spot the camouflage nets, gun emplacements, and supply dumps that indicate military value. One analyst, leaning over a light table with a magnifying loupe, pauses. Among the hundreds of images taken that day, one shows a rectangular compound surrounded by barbed wire, clearly a detention facility. Inside the compound, scrawled across the open ground in crude but unmistakable letters, is the signal, US. The analyst stares at the image for a long moment, then calls over a supervisor. The supervisor examines the photograph, checks the coordinates, and makes a phone call. Within hours, the photograph is on the desk of a senior intelligence officer. Within days, it is in the hands of mission planners. The coordinates of Makassar POW camp are removed from all bombing target lists and marked as off-limits. A notation is added to the classified files. Allied prisoners present, signal confirmed. Antrim never knows that the signal has been received. He goes about his days, digging new latrines, hauling supplies, enduring the heat and hunger and the slow dissolution of his body. The air raids continue. Bombs fall on the harbor, on the airfield, on the city. But they do not fall on the camp. The bombers roar overhead, and the prisoners crouch in the slit trenches Antrim designed, and they do not die. The years that follow are a long twilight. Men continue to die from disease and starvation, but not from bombs. The Japanese guards, increasingly desperate as the war turns against them, become erratic. Some grow more brutal, others simply stop caring. The camp exists in a state of suspended animation, waiting for an end that seems both inevitable and infinitely distant. Antrim survives. He survives the malaria that kills a third of the camp. He survives the dysentery that turns men into hollow shells. He survives the casual violence, the arbitrary punishments, the grinding monotony of captivity. He survives because he has something that keeps him tethered to life when so many others let go. It is not hope exactly. It is something harder and less sentimental. It is duty. The duty to stay alive. The duty to bear witness. The duty to bring some accounting home. In August of 1945, the atomic bombs fall on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The prisoners know nothing of this. They know only that one day the guards seem agitated, conferring intense whispers. A week later, the commandant assembles the prisoners and announces, through a translator, that Japan has accepted an armistice. The war is over. The prisoners do not cheer. They have been conditioned too thoroughly for that. They stand in formation, skeletal and silent, trying to process information that does not feel real. Some men weep quietly. Others simply stare. Antrim, standing at the front of the formation, feels a pressure release in his chest. a tightness he did not know was there until it was gone. Liberation, when it comes, is chaotic and slow. Allied forces move through the island, accepting Japanese surrenders, securing airfields, evacuating prisoners. Antrim and the other survivors are transported to a field hospital, where doctors examine them with expressions of barely concealed horror. Antrim weighs 97 pounds. His teeth are loose in his gums. His hair has gone gray. He is 36 years old and looks 60. But he is alive. And so are most of the 2,700 men who were held at Makassar. They are alive because bombs that were meant to fall on them were redirected elsewhere, because reconnaissance photographs revealed a signal scratched into volcanic soil, because one man, in a moment of desperation or inspiration or simple stubborn refusal to do nothing, built a message into the earth and hoped someone would read it. Antrim returns to the United States in late 1945. He undergoes medical treatment, gains back some of the weight, submits to debriefings and reports. The Navy, recognizing that he survived captivity, assigns him to administrative roles, not yet understanding the full scope of what he did. That understanding comes slowly, pieced together from prisoner testimonies, from intelligence reports, from the classified photographs that are finally declassified years after the war. In 1947, President Harry S. Truman presents Antrim with the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest military decoration. The citation commends him for his actions in April 1942, for placing himself in mortal danger to save a fellow prisoner, for extraordinary heroism in the face of certain death. The ceremony is formal, dignified. Antrim accepts the medal with the same calm reserve he brought to everything else. He does not mention the trenches. That part of the story remains classified, known only to a handful of intelligence officers, for reasons having to do with methods and sources and the bureaucratic inertia of secrecy. It is not until the 1970s, after Antrim's death, that the full story of the trench signal becomes public. By then, he is beyond caring about recognition or vindication. He is beyond everything. But the story endures, passed down through naval history, taught at Annapolis, analyzed by military ethicists and leadership instructors. It endures because it illustrates something fundamental about what leadership means when all the trappings of authority are stripped away. Antrim was a lieutenant commander in a prison camp where rank meant nothing. He had no power to give orders, no ability to enforce decisions, no leverage beyond his own willingness to suffer consequences. And yet he led. He led by standing up when standing up was suicidal. He led by thinking strategically in a situation that seemed to permit no strategy. He led by seeing a possibility that no one else saw and acting on it despite the probability of failure. The trench signal was an act of asymmetric resistance, a refusal to accept the role of passive victim. It was also an act of profound optimism, a belief that someone somewhere was looking and that if they looked carefully enough they would understand. In a place designed to extinguish hope, Antrim carved hope into the ground and waited. And someone did look. And they did understand. And 2,700 men lived. There is a photograph of Antrim late in his life, after his promotion to Rear Admiral, after his career as an instructor in leadership and ethics, after his retirement. He is standing on the deck of a ship at sunset, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the horizon. His face is lined and grave, the face of a man who has seen things that cannot be unseen. But there is something else there too, something in the set of his jaw, the steadiness of his gaze. It is not happiness. It is not even peace. It is simply the quiet knowledge that when the moment came, when everything depended on one man's willingness to step forward, he did not flinch. That is the legacy. Not the medal, not the rank, not the honors and commendations. The legacy is the decision itself, made in the space of 3 heartbeats in a prison camp in the spring of 1942, and then made again in the summer of 1943 when he drew letters in volcanic soil. The legacy is the proof that leadership is not a position or a title. It is a choice made in the moment when it matters most, often by people who have every reason to choose otherwise. Richard "Not" Antrim died in 1969 at the age of 60. He is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. His Medal of Honor citation hangs in the Naval Academy Museum. The story of the trench signal is taught in military leadership courses around the world. And somewhere in the archives, yellowed and fragile, there is a photograph taken from 30,000 feet in October 1943, showing a rectangle of barbed wire and 2 letters carved in the earth. U.S. We are here. Do not forget us. We are still here. That was the message. And it was received. If you've made it this far, I want to ask you something. In your life, in your work, in your community, have you ever faced a moment where you had to choose between safety and the right thing? Where the cost of acting seemed unbearable, but the cost of not acting was worse. Leadership, real leadership, often happens in those moments when no one is watching and no one can help you and the choice is entirely yours. Richard Antrim had no authority, no weapons, no leverage. All he had was a choice, and he made it. If the story meant something to you, if it made you think about courage or leadership or what it means to act when action seems impossible, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and down in the comments tell me, what would you have done? If you were standing in that prison yard, watching that beating, knowing intervention meant death, would you have stepped forward? Or is there another way you might have resisted? I want to know what you think because these questions matter. They mattered in 1942, and they matter now. Thanks for watching. And remember, leadership isn't about the authority you have. It's about what you do when you have none.